Hello everybody, we are doing week 9 recap relatively late. I wanted to get the original video out, but we had a family member's dog we were watching, so he was barking like crazy because it was storming. So after I recorded the video, I realized that the audio was terrible. Hopefully this one's a little better. So before we start, please make sure to subscribe if you're new to me or the channel. That being said, let's get on into it. So the first game of the week was the Winnipeg Blue Bombers against the BC Lions. Obviously, I'm sure you're well aware, and the game started off with Zach Collaros absolutely torching BC's defense with two big throws as Winnipeg scores first. They're up 7-0. Then Winnipeg's defense gets a stop on 3rd and 1. They get the ball back, and Collaros' crew gets good field position, which they decide to punish BC yet again with a deep ball, 57-yard touchdown. Can't remember if it was to Kenny Lawler or Dalton Schoen. I think it might have been Dalton Schoen, as Winnipeg is up just like that, 14-0. Dane Evans and Lucky Whitehead tried to connect on a deep ball to the sideline for the Lions, and BC, again, forced to punt. Kind of seemed to be a familiar thing in this game. And a bit later, it's Dane with him, again, looking down the sideline, this time for Hollins, but it's Demario Houston who ends up getting an interception for his 6th of the season. At the time, that was the league lead in week 10. I don't know if it still is. I'll have to go back and check, but again, good for Houston and Winnipeg as they're off to a flying start against the hapless Lions. A little bit later in the bloodbath that was this game, you see Jalen Edwards-Cooper, and he is trying to, obviously stop the play. Ends up getting hit with a pass interference call. I think he just didn't know where the ball was and didn't turn around. That was unfortunate as it set up the ball inside BC's 3. Brady Oliveira decides, hey, why not just punish him again, as it is 24-4 Winnipeg. BC looking to gain some momentum at the half. Dane Evans throwing the ball, but it's Brandon Alexander. Brandon Alexander says, you know what, no, we can't have them get any momentum, as he ends up picking the ball off. It's 27-4 at the half, and this game already feels like, wow, this was supposed to be a divisional clash of the top, maybe even the CFL's best. And no, it is a blowout at the 30-minute mark. Not too much to say here in the second half, as we saw Dane Evans get hurt. Seems like he's going to be all right. Vernon Adams Jr., of course, is back at this point. But we got to see Winnipeg pour it on in the second half, and they end up making their biggest statement of the year. The Bombers are back, and then we get to also talk about the fact that Kenny Lawler went for 200 yards and Dalton Schoen went for 137, 337 total yards. Collaros obviously had a big game, 280 yards, I think, at the half, as the Lions get beat 50-14. The second game of the week was the Toronto Argonauts, unbeaten Toronto Argonauts at 6-0, traveling to Calgary to play the Stampeders, who really needed a win. Calgary looked to end Toronto's unbeaten streak. They got on the board early thanks to a Tommy Stevens rushing touchdown, but it was Toronto with a big 76-yard play. Sounds like every play for Toronto that's a throw is a big play, to Cam Phillips, which is a touchdown. And this Argos offense with Kelly out there is just a joy to watch. And for them, getting big plays just seems to be as normal as getting up and eating breakfast. Unfortunately for them, you would see Rene Paredes get a field goal to go up 10-7, but not long after that, you see Chad Kelly kind of limping around. He ended up missing the rest of this game, so it would be Cameron Dukes coming in to replace him. He throws an interception on a pass to the end zone, so you have that there, as the Argos are looking to battle some adversity here. No big deal though, because it's just 10-7 right about time for the half. So if you're Toronto, you're thinking, well, we can just limp into the locker room down 3 and figure things out with some adjustments at the break. But Javon Lake ends up taking a punt, fumbles the ball, and it's Calgary that falls on it in the end zone. So it's 17-7 at the half. Rene Paredes scores a field goal, kicks a field goal halfway through the third, as it's 20-7. Not a whole lot to talk about here in this game. Tommy Lee Lewis does fumble the ball with about 3 minutes left, and the Stampeders ends up getting a turnover on downs. And they are able to force it, actually, I should say, and they win by 13 with a Chad Kelly-less Toronto side after the 7 went in the second quarter. Obviously, this is not to take away the fact that Calgary is able to run the ball a lot with Mills, 27 carries for like 137 rushing yards. The longest carry was 13 yards, so that really impressed me to have that rushing total with no big play to say, oh, this was a 60-yard scamper that really padded his stats, so that's good. I thought Calgary's defensive line, especially at the edge, was able to keep Dukes contained where he couldn't really run the way he wanted, and I thought they were really get a lot of interior pressure. So even if he tried to get going and step up into the pocket and maybe find a gap. There wasn't anything to have, and I also think they didn't get so far outside off the edge that he was able to make a break off the outside. Great win for great win for Calgary as Toronto suffers its first loss since October 29th, 2022. That was when they threw in all the backups against Montreal in a meaningless game as they had the top seed locked up. The third game of the week featured the Hamilton Tiger Cats and Montreal Alouettes. Montreal traveling over to Hamilton to play, and I gotta say, as a BC fan, it hurts to say this again, but Sean Lemon making the Montreal Alouettes look good by signing him. He has a sack early in this game. I don't think he gets credited with the forced fumble. Regardless, Montreal recovers the ball. Problem is, Cody Fajardo throws an interception on the ensuing play. A little bit later, you do see Montreal in field goal range as they throw out David Cote. Problem is, he misses the field goal, so that is not ideal. There's something you would see in this game. And then in the second, we would see James Butler end up getting a touchdown here for Hamilton. Good for them. A little bit later in this half, we would see David Cote again going for another field goal after the two sides had traded field goals. He misses as it is 11-3 Hamilton after 30 minutes of action. Then in the third, we see Simone Lawrence get a sack and a forced fumble, which turns into good karma for the Hamilton offense. Of course, you see Taylor Powell end up trucking a media guy on accident. He helps him out. Good karma again, because when they have the ball, they end up getting a field goal on that drive. They're up 14-3. Problem is, Montreal starts to claw their way back into the game. Obviously, felt like Hamilton was kind of in the driver's seat of this game, but with the score being so low, they obviously weren't really in the driver's seat. As you see, 2 field goals in the third quarter by the Alouettes as they're at, that point where they're right there, 14-9. Hamilton still with the lead, but things are getting a little bit dire. A flea flicker and a pass interference call later, and we can see Caleb Evans get a rushing touchdown to give Montreal their first lead of the game. Then Lemon strikes again with an interception. Lowell Uguag ends up getting a tip ball where he just tips it up in the air. Lemon comes down with it, and that is good news for the Alouettes. They go on to score 10 more unanswered points for them, and you get to see a sack by Sean Lemon, and he ends up finishing with like 2 sacks, an interception, maybe a forced fumble on this one. It was a good game for him. Montreal ends up scoring 24 unanswered points to move to 4-3. Good win for them over Hamilton side that really probably should have won this game. Regardless, though, you look at who won it, not how they won it, as the Owls end up getting the W. William Stanback picks up his first 100-plus yard rushing game of the season. Good for him, by the way, for Stanback, as the Owls are in second spot in the East. Then we see the second game of the week as the Ottawa Redblacks travel to Saskatchewan to play the Rough Riders. First notable thing in this game is Saskatchewan goes out there with their field goal unit, then goes in the offensive formation, gets Ottawa to go off sides, which leads to a Jamal Murrow rushing touchdown to make them pay for their mistake with that rushing touchdown there. A fumble on a punt return does lead to Ottawa being in great field position to score, but Anthony Lanier gets a sack to just limit it to 3 as it is 7-all. Both sides do get some points, and it is 13-8 at the break. Saskatchewan does get a little bit of a break, though, I guess, in the second half, as Sean Bain Jr. hauls in a 44-yard reception, as that is a touchdown, and you get to see the Rough Riders go up 20-8. Kind of feel like they're in a spot where they can put this game away. Unfortunately for the Riders, they make a mistake. I don't remember whose mistake it was. It was basically trying to hand off the ball or maybe have a read option here, and it was Bryce Carter who takes advantage of it and gets the fumble for Ottawa, and again puts him in good spot for this game to score. Thankfully for Saskatchewan, Anthony Lanier is there to save the day every time there's a turnover, and while it does lead to a field goal, he gets a sack. So instead of those being touchdowns, you can thank Anthony Lanier for keeping points off the board. I know obviously they led to some points, but they were limited in some way thanks to his play. Lewis Ward does get a field goal to close out the third quarter here, as it is 23-14 Saskatchewan at the end of 45 minutes of play. Unfortunately, again, turnovers kill the Rough Riders, as on the second play of the fourth quarter, the ball pops out, and it's Douglas Coleman that takes it to the house. It is now 23-21 Saskatchewan, but obviously that is nowhere near the lead that they had just a bit earlier, as these turnovers keep turning into points, which is how you lose games. With 2 minutes left, you get to see Coach Dickinson go for it on 3rd and 2. He is on his 20. They fail to convert. Ottawa ends up getting the ball, and on the goal line, 3rd and 1, they end up deciding to go for a field goal instead of trying to punch it in. They end up getting it, so it's 24-23, not a lot of time left. So you're thinking maybe just make a stop here after the talk about whether or not they should have gone for it, whether they shouldn't have, whatever the case you want to argue. Ultimately, though, it's Lawther that ends up getting a 56-yard field goal to win this one for Saskatchewan, 26-24. They had 6 sacks to none for the Red Blacks compared to the Red Blacks. Shouldn't have been as close as it was. Again, Saskatchewan ends up just really shooting themselves in the foot with these turnovers, but they do get the W as Ottawa falls, thanks in part to the decision, I guess if you want to call it that. It was a decision, but I don't really know how you want to argue it, because if they fail to get that, then obviously they have to get a turnover on downs, whatever the case is. What are your thoughts from this week of action? I know this came out a little bit later, and I do apologize for that. Anyway, everybody leaves your comments down below, and also, everybody, please make sure to stay safe and have a great night.